By the spring of 1947, Los Angeles was drowning in speculation. Every man Elizabeth Short had spoken to became a suspect. Every stranger who crossed her path was scrutinized. Every rumor was treated as a lead, until it wasn't. Police files ballooned. Hundreds of tips, dozens of interrogations, names scribbled into reports and quietly crossed out days later. The investigation didn't stall because of a lack of suspects. It stalled because no one could agree on which evidence mattered. One of the most disturbing aspects of Elizabeth Short's murder was its precision. The way her body was treated suggested control, planning, knowledge of anatomy. This wasn't the result of sudden rage. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't careless. Some medical professionals who reviewed the case later believed the killer may have had surgical knowledge, or at least experience handling bodies. That observation should have narrowed the suspect pool dramatically. It didn't. Why? Because following that lead would have forced investigators to examine people with status. Doctors, medical students, professionals connected to hospitals, people who didn't look like criminals. And in 1947, that mattered. One suspect, in particular, stood out. A man with medical training. A history of disturbing behavior, a personal connection, however indirect, to Elizabeth Short. Years later, several detectives privately admitted they believed this man was responsible. But, at the time, he was never arrested. His background made the accusation complicated. His social standing made it risky. And the evidence, while compelling, was circumstantial. So police hesitated. And hesitation, in this case, was fatal to the truth. Another suspect walked directly into police stations and claimed responsibility. More than once. He described killing Elizabeth, he described details of the crime, he described disposing of evidence. But his accounts were inconsistent. Some details were wrong. Others seemed borrowed from newspapers. Police concluded he was seeking attention. They labeled him unreliable, and they stopped listening. That decision made sense, on paper. But years later, cold case investigators noticed something unsettling. Some of the details he mentioned weren't public at the time. They had been ignored. The Black Dahlia investigation was plagued by a specific problem. Too much information. Too little structure. Witness statements conflicted. Alibis overlapped. Timelines blurred. Instead of clarifying the chaos, police often discarded what didn't fit emerging theories. Leads that complicated narratives were quietly dropped. Statements that contradicted preferred suspects were deprioritized. Physical evidence was weighed inconsistently. Not because officers were malicious, but because they were overwhelmed. And overwhelmed systems don't seek truth, they seek closure. As the investigation dragged on, police attention drifted. Away from the crime. Toward Elizabeth herself. Her movements. Her relationships. Her reputation. Investigators framed her life as risky, and implied that risk explained her death. But this framing did something dangerous. It shifted responsibility. Instead of asking who had access or who had motive, the narrative became, why was she there? Why was she alone? Why did she trust people? Those questions didn't solve the crime. They excused the failure to solve it. Some suspects were questioned aggressively. Others weren't. Men with money. Men with influence. Men connected to institutions. Their interviews were shorter. Their alibis were accepted quickly. Their inconsistencies were explained away. Police didn't write this down explicitly. But patterns emerged. The investigation was not blind. It saw class, it saw power. And it adjusted accordingly. Over time, key pieces of evidence disappeared. Some were misplaced. Some degraded. Some were simply unaccounted for. Original photographs. Physical items recovered from mailings. Early witness notes. Whether through negligence or disorganization, the result was the same. The case lost its backbone. And once evidence is gone, truth becomes negotiable. Decades later, when researchers reviewed the original police files, a pattern emerged. The most promising leads were often abandoned quickly. The most troubling suspects were handled cautiously. the loudest distractions received the most attention. The investigation wasn't guided by probability. It was guided by pressure. Pressure from media, pressure from politicians, pressure to reassure a city on edge. And in that environment, the safest decision was often to do nothing definitive at all. As years passed, Elizabeth Short stopped being a person in public memory. She became an idea. The Black Dahlia, the unsolved girl, the Hollywood horror. Books rewrote her, films stylized her, theories reshaped her life to fit dramatic arcs. But legends don't need justice. People do. And every time the myth grew, the real investigation shrank. Here's the twist that still unsettles investigators. The Black Dahlia case may not be unsolved because it was too complex. It may be unsolved because too many people knew too much. Not enough to convict, but enough to protect themselves. Enough to stay silent. Enough to let time erase consequences. By the end of the 1940s, the Black Dahlia case was technically open, but functionally dead. Suspects aged, witnesses moved on, evidence faded, and Elizabeth Short's name became shorthand for mystery, rather than a reminder of failure. The evidence wasn't missing. It was ignored.